All right, good afternoon, everybody. And again, welcome to the June edition of the Correspondent Lender Training Program. Today's focus is going to be on portfolio loans. We'll have a couple of different aspects of portfolio loans to cover today. We'll go through a little bit of a PowerPoint presentation, kind of talking about the differences between the standalone and the portfolio product. We'll go through some training on the portfolio loan sizer itself. We'll go through some training on BLN and the loan calculator, and some shortcuts that can be used there about how to get these many properties into BLN in the easiest possible fashion, and also give you some tools to better help your borrowers and your employees track these loans and submit these loans. So one thing before we get started, if you have questions, we're definitely going to, as we always do, try to leave some time at the end for Q&A, or maybe even do some in the during the presentation. So if you have questions, go ahead and put them into the toolbar function there. You can submit your questions. Erica from our marketing department has been so good to kind of keep an eye on those for me and give me a heads up when they come through. And then later on, Jacob will be showing you guys the BLN system and some of the upgrades that are built into there. So once again, thank you for joining us, and we can get started. All right. So first, just an overview of what we're going to be covering here. We're going to talk about the advantages and the differences between the portfolio loan for 30-year product, as well as the individual loans that we do, and when it might benefit a client of yours one way or the other. We'll talk about the diligence and the documentation that goes with these files, and how best to kind of prepare for these loans, and some of the things that might be a little bit different, or some of the things that we see that are maybe most commonly missed or not picked up on right away. And about how to stay organized and setting proper expectations with your borrowers. When we are doing portfolio loans, they're bigger, certainly, as far as files and documentation goes, and that has a ripple effect throughout the process when we get through the different team members who have to review those files. We'll talk about the BLN functionality and the loan sizer and how those two are working together, and then we'll leave some time for questions at the end before we get into some of the sizer questions we're going to have. So first off, we'll talk about the advantages and differences between the portfolio loans versus the individual loans. So for one, portfolio loans are just more convenient, right? You can take all those properties, and depending on how many somebody has, maybe they got 20 different properties. That can be a bit of a mess to manage if you are, having 20 individual mortgages and payments, and you have to go to a closing table and maybe sign 20 different loan doc packages, or maybe that even has to get broken up over multiple days because the title agent can't handle that many at once or something. So certainly the convenience of doing a portfolio loan when you have many properties is a huge advantage there. And at the end of the day, that winds up being one simple mortgage payment, and the escrows are all managed by the servicer. The fees on the loan, when it comes to points, the points are going to be the same regardless of whether your group of properties is done on a portfolio basis or if they're done on an individual basis. So we give an example here. If the borrower wants to buy down of 1.5 points on a portfolio of $500,000, that's going to be the same cost as 1.5 points on 5 separate $100,000 loans. So at the end of the day, it's going to be $1,500 per 100,000 there if we're doing 1.5 points. So that'd be $7,500 one way or the other. When we're looking at the sizer and the calculator, we'll talk about some of the differences there as far as proof of funds to close and why those might be slightly different. The legal fee is where you do get an advantage with the portfolio loan product. When we're doing a portfolio loan, we only charge $9.95 for the first property in the group, and then an additional $195 for each subsequent property. This isn't the same in every state. New York's the one state that's a little bit different, but for everything else, we should be able to maintain this same order. So, for example, if we had a deal with 5 individual properties and we did 5 separate loans, you'd be paying $9.95 for each of the 5, and that would be $49.75. If we're doing one portfolio loan with 5 properties, the $9.95 plus the $195 for each additional property would only result in a legal fee of $17.75. So a big difference there. And one of the reasons for that, obviously, is it's a lot less work for the legal team to draft the loan document package for a portfolio versus a individual loan times 5. So big advantage there for your borrowers to get some cost savings when it makes sense. That said, it really, we do ask that any portfolio loan be a minimum of at least 3 properties. Release fees are an area where this is going to be maybe a point of contention for some of your individual borrowers. And it's something that we spend a fair amount of time explaining to folks on the phone. So I want to make sure you guys have the best understanding of how to talk about release fees for mortgages. And this applies not just to the 30-year product, this also applies on bridge loans as well, where we have multiple pieces of collateral under one particular loan. And what's going to happen there is we're basing these loans on the fact that all these properties tied together are giving us a certain amount of security and collateral and equity that's going to make us feel more comfortable. When somebody wants to pay off one of the individual properties from the group, we're losing some of that comfort level. And generally, when somebody's paying off one of the properties, it's most likely that the best property of the group is the one that's being sold off. So our position as a lender is further reduced. So one of the ways to account for that is that when they go to pay off one of the properties from the group, the payoff amount for those properties when they go to pay them off is going to be the amount owed on that property plus an additional 20%. That 20% is not a fee that we collect and put on our books. That 20% just goes towards paying down the balance of the existing mortgage. So the remaining 4 properties will get that extra 20% buy down and further reduce the balance of the overall mortgage that's remaining. Once you get to the last property, if somebody was selling off or refinancing that last property, the payoff would just be whatever is currently owed on that mortgage. There would be no additional buy down at that point. And this way, we're constantly, improving the equity position as we lose those pieces of collateral, because that makes our loan less secure over time. The equity buy down is what gives us that guarantee of security over the long haul. So when we have people who maybe are a little bit uncomfortable with the release fee, or they have a portfolio where they know, in 3-5 years, whatever, I'm probably going to be selling this one property off. I know it. Maybe it's better to do that one property as a standalone and do the remaining as a portfolio, so that one property doesn't have the impact of the entire portfolio requiring the release fee. The other thing you could do there too is if they had that one property they know they were going to sell, but the rest they were going to keep, you could maybe do a 5-year prepay on a portfolio and do a standalone for the one they want to sell sooner with a shorter prepayment period, so that they don't have to worry about selling that property in 4 or 5 years. They could sell it off after the 3rd year or something like that. So understanding the release fees and being able to talk to your folks about it is definitely an important component. You can read more about it in the guidelines that we have for you guys as well. But certainly an area of discussion that needs to be had with your clients, so that they understand, because they're going to see this in the commitment and the mortgage documents anyway, they understand what's going to happen if they go to pay off one of those properties. And sometimes we get questions at the end of the day when we're trying to get these loans closed, and somebody goes, I didn't know about that. Why would I do that? And then it's a difficult conversation to have sometimes. But at the end of the day, the key component there is understanding that we're not actually collecting that as an actual fee. It's an equity pay down of the existing mortgage. That's where all that money's going. Some of the other differences we're going to have when it comes to underwriting guidelines, our standard minimum value requirement or purchase price for an individual loan on the 30-year product is $100,000. When we're doing a portfolio loan, we're looking for an average value of at least $100,000, with no single property having a value below $75,000. The key component there is nothing below $75,000. If you got an appraisal that comes in at 74, it's still going to be a hard no for us. 75 is the absolute floor minimum we can go to there. And if we do have some properties that appraise for, around $75,000, $80,000, you might have to see a pricing adjustment for that as well. The lowered value properties are certainly less desirable for us and less profitable. So you might see some adjustments on pricing there if need be, if it's in really, less than optimal condition. An example that would work would be if we had 3 property portfolios with values of 75, 100, and 125. That would be 300 total. Divided by the 3 properties will give us that 100K minimum average. Just be aware of the fact, though, that we're not going to want to see a portfolio of $75,000, $80,000 properties, and then one of the properties is like $800,000, and that's going to make up the difference for the rest. The majority of the properties should be in that 100K plus range. You only want a handful of properties falling below that, but it should be a pretty small percentage of the overall portfolio that falls below that 100K guideline. If you've got something that's maybe looking a little like we're going to be close on that guideline, or might be an issue because we might fall a little bit below it, let's have a conversation with your loan officer directly on those up front. So we're not having that conversation at the time of the, when we get the appraisals back and they've already been paid for. And part of that is a little bit difficult because not every borrower is realistic about the condition of their property or the value of their property. And that can be a little bit concerning. We've all dealt with that over time. So we'll do our best to kind of look up the properties online and get a sense of what kind of values we're looking at here. But, try to instruct your borrowers not to overinflate those as low valued properties if they can, because if they're realistic about it, I'd rather tell them, hey, you know what, that one's not going to make the cut. We need to drop it from the portfolio. I'd rather tell them that up front rather than having them spend, hundreds of dollars on an appraisal. When it comes to our DSCR, our debt service coverage ratio, you guys have seen this before, I'm sure, and many different walks of lending. But our minimum DSCR requirement for the 30-year product is going to be a 1.10 whenever we're doing an individual property. And that's just your gross rents divided by your PITIA monthly expenses. And as long as that ratio is at least 1.10 on a standard loan, we're good to go there. When we're talking about portfolio loans, we get a little bit extra wiggle room here, and this is an advantage of doing a portfolio that can help out. We want to see an average DSCR of at least 1.1, with no single property having a DSCR below 1.0. For those of you who may not be as familiar with DSCR, it's a measurement of cash flow, right? How much am I taking in versus what my monthly expenses are on this particular property? So if I have a debt service coverage ratio of 1.0, that is a neutral cash flow property. It's not making money, but it's not losing money, at least based on those numbers. In reality, it's probably losing money because you're going to have expenses outside of those numbers, lawn care, maintenance, snow removal, whatever. So for most investors, you'd like to see a higher debt service coverage ratio than a 1.0 for sure. But the higher that number goes, the better the cash flow is for the property, the easier it is to qualify that person at the max guidelines and terms. And that's, usually what most people are looking for. We get a lot of cash out refis on these, and people are trying to get to that 75 LTV on a cash out. And everything we can do to kind of guide them there and make sure the cash flow is going to work gives us that best opportunity up front. When it comes to our diligence and documents, one of the advantages of doing a portfolio loan is you can order bulk appraisals. And oftentimes you can usually get a discount from the appraiser for the fact that we're sending over a batch order of bulk properties. That really applies only if the properties are in the same general area, though. If somebody's got properties all over the state or something like that, that might not work. We'd have to probably pass that out to a number of different local appraisers who could then complete that assignment. But assuming they're all in the same general area, you would be able to get a bulk discount on your appraisal orders in most cases. So that's always a nice perk. Anywhere we can save money is good. CDAs are going to be required on all loans, regardless of whether it's a single or portfolio loan. The CDA is a collateral desktop analysis. That's the $90 report that we get that kind of confirms the appraisal values. And like 99% of those come in just fine. It's the 1% that can be a little bit annoying. If we do have a CDA that comes in with a value discrepancy of 10% or greater from what the appraisal says, at that point we will go to a BPO and we will take the lesser value of the BPO or the full appraisal. If you want to, you can upgrade that and do a full appraisal or even a hybrid appraisal instead of a BPO, but the BPO is the faster, cheaper option there for sure. Flood certs and tax certs are required on every property. Depending on how we're ordering the appraisal, these can either be built into the appraisal cost or they might be billed separately. So speak with your loan officer about that. Flood certs are a standard $15. Tax certs are a standard $55. The only state that we do not order tax certs in is Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, for whatever reason, the tax certs cost hundreds and hundreds of dollars. So that will be an area where we're going to be looking to the borrower's title agent or attorney to aid us in getting the tax information from title. That can be a little bit slower and that can be a little bit more painful if we're waiting on a rate lock to get that tax number. So making that a priority for the attorney or title agent on the front end can help to get that number in quicker. And hopefully before the appraisal comes in, we have that number and it's locked in so that we can get that rate lock to our treasury team and signed off right when that appraisal comes in. Excuse me. Some of the other documents we're going to be looking for, any purchase transaction, we definitely want to get the purchase contract. We actually need the purchase contract for any 30-year loan if we're doing a purchase. That's required for the appraisal. The appraisal on the 30-year purchases is the only appraisal that we will order as a purchase transaction. Every other appraisal that we're ordering is just to ascertain the market value. So that appraiser on those is actually going to be looking at the contract and what the purchase price is and confirming whether or not that's a valid number. Surprisingly, I do see a number of those come in above the purchase price, which is usually a little unusual from back in my conventional days where they mostly just hit the number, but good to see sometimes. When we have a refinance that was within the last 12 months of a purchase, so somebody bought the property within the last 12 months, those are areas where we're going to want to see a copy of the HUD from the purchase, showing what they paid for it, whether or not there was financing on it at the time of purchase as well. And the borrower, if they have done any rehab to the property in the last 12 months, we should get a rehab budget from them for what they did to the property. That'll help justify the value and get us comfortable with the seasoning period on the loan. For our 30-year product as well as our bridge product, the seasoning period for any 1 to 4 family property is going to be 3 months from the date of purchase if they purchased it with a mortgage. It'll be 6 months from the date of purchase if they purchase it all cash. I've gotten this question before. If somebody buys it all cash but then throws a kind of a bogus mortgage on the property, can we still count it as a 3-month seasoning? The answer is no. We want to see that mortgage on the HUD at closing. If we see it on the HUD at closing, then we know we're in good shape there. Other things we're going to want to collect are leases and proof of rent. The leases for any occupied units should be provided up front. We want to get those and include those as part of the appraisal order whenever possible. If we're doing purchases, say it's a single family rental that they're going to be purchasing, it's perfectly fine that that property might be vacant. The borrower will have to deliver at least 90 days post-closing to show that they've gotten the property rented out. If they don't get it rented out within the 90 days post-closing, they are subject to a 2% rate hike. I don't think we've ever actually done a rate hike on anyone in the years we've been doing this product, and that's thousands of loans. That said, there's always going to be a first at some point, but 90 days is an exceptionally long period of time for somebody to actually be able to get a tenant in there. Most people can do it in about 30 days if the unit is ready. So talk to your borrowers about that. If somebody's balking at the 90 days, though, that can be a little unsettling, I would say, as a loan officer. So certainly want to make sure everybody's got the right expectations. If we're doing a 1 or 2 family property and it's a cash out or a refi scenario, I would want to see that both of those units are already occupied, or the single unit would be already occupied with a valid lease. If it's a 3 or a 4 unit, we can get away with a vacant unit on those, but the ideal situation on any cash out or refi is to have them leased up. If multiple units are vacant, you could be subject to LTV reductions, which is obviously less than optimal. In those situations, you're probably better off waiting until they get the unit occupied before we complete the transaction. That way we don't have to do an LTV reduction for vacant units. And the homeowner's insurance. We want to make sure that the dwelling coverage is sufficient. It should be at least the amount of the loan size whenever possible. Some scenarios you might have, like out in California, the land value makes up most of the value of the property. When that happens, we just want to see that it's at least full replacement coverage. And also we have these 6 months of rent loss coverage that need to be on there. And the rent loss coverage is going to be based on the greater of the as-is rents or the market rents. So whichever one's higher is going to be the actual calculation used for the rent loss coverage. We'll show you an example there in the loan sizer of how that should look. And then we have payoffs and mortgage histories. So anybody who has an existing mortgage on their property needs to be able to provide us with a payoff so we can get the loan paid off at closing. But they also need to provide a 6-month payment history or verification of mortgage to show that those payments have been made on time. Please note, and some of you may have run into this before, but we don't lend on foreclosures and bailout situations or delinquent mortgages. We're not looking to pick up anybody else's bad debt. So if somebody hasn't been good on their existing mortgage, don't expect that to be a loan that we're going to be able to do. If we got people who are struggling with the mortgage, or they're 8 months past their maturity and the existing lender's trying to go through a foreclosure process on them, that's not going to be a loan we're going to be able to get through. Okay, so a couple of things on staying organized and setting proper expectations. So we talked a little bit at the front about how, when we have a lot of these properties in the portfolio loans, obviously we're getting more appraisals and there's more document collection. It takes more time to review those things. And we're kind of all beholden to the last one that crosses the finish line. And what I mean by that is I really can't do a rate lock or get anything finalized on my end as a loan officer until all of the appraisals are in on the portfolio loan. So it's that last guy over the finish line that's finally going to give me the ability to take action, get a rate lock, or we could still order the CDAs on the ones that have come in, but that last one we would have to wait for that CDA to come back before we can finally advance it to the underwriting stage. The more docs, the more properties that are involved. You got 10 properties, that's 10 insurance policies we got to review, 10 tax certs, 10 or more leases, depending on the leases that we're getting and the number of units in each property. So all that takes a lot more time. The more of that stuff we can get up front and kind of vet it out as we go, the easier that process gets. But the loan officer and processor aren't the only ones who need to review that documentation. That also gets reviewed when we finally go to underwriting. They're going to go through and sweep through all those documents and confirm all the information is accurate within those documents and matches the information that we put into the system in the sizer. So again, slower process. They're going to have to review all those 10 insurance policies, match them up with the sizer, make sure the dwelling coverage is acceptable, make sure the rent loss coverage is acceptable, the mortgagee clause is on there, the borrower name is up in the corner, and we have an effective date and policy period that meets our requirements. All that takes a lot of time. So the more properties, the larger the portfolio is, we need to set the expectations that this is going to take a longer time. Generally speaking, depending on how quickly we're getting appraisals and title work done, these are probably closer to like a 6 to 8 week turn time, unless it's a very small portfolio. So setting proper expectations there, letting people know like, hey, it could take about a week before this thing gets through the underwriting process, just because there's so many documents that have to be reviewed. And those underwriters, they have a lot on their plate as it is. So setting expectations, letting people know that, the timeline is going to be a little bit different on these as opposed to a single property loan. A couple of things that we have available for you guys that we can share with you at the conclusion of the presentation here today is a portfolio loan tracker. This is for you guys to use internally. Some of our loan officers like using this as well. And it's basically a spreadsheet that helps you kind of track, what appraisals have been ordered or received, what CDAs have been paid for and received, and just kind of a checklist for you guys to go through so that you can make sure that you're not missing anything in your due diligence and in your doc collection as we go through the process. So hopefully you guys will find some value in that. I know our team does. So happy to share that with you folks. And the other thing we have is a portfolio data sheet. And this is really a spreadsheet that's available for your investors to fill out when they want to submit a portfolio loan. A lot of investors will already have some sort of spreadsheet or template with all the property information on it. Excel is always the preferred version for any kind of spreadsheet we're going to get. If it's a PDF, expect that to take longer because we're going to have to do manual entries for that. But the data sheet that we're going to provide to you has the exact same data points that we would require on the loan sizer. It just doesn't have any of the pricing and formulas in it. This way, it's an easy translation for everybody to kind of, just copy and paste that data into the sizer, and we can get real numbers much faster that way. So we'll talk a little about sizer and BLN functionality. We'll do right after the presentation with the PowerPoint here. We'll be touching on the portfolio loan sizer itself. I'll show you some of the things we talked about earlier. But making sure that we have the loan type accurately, the FICO score, if they're a foreign national, selecting the right prepayment penalty option, choosing the right amortization schedule option, and choosing the right interest only option if there is going to be one, or perhaps even putting in a broker rebate in there. Always making sure we're filling out those fields at the top of the sizer. Sometimes I'll get somebody who says, hey, this isn't giving me any data, and it's just because they missed one of those fields. And if those things aren't set, the sizer won't populate the proper terms. All data factors into what we can offer individually and as a whole. So accuracy of the data that we put into our sizers and our calculator is extremely important. When it comes to rental income information for properties, all the rental income in the sizer is done on a monthly basis. So if you get $1,000 a month per unit, we want the $1,000 per month per unit in there. When it comes to the expense side of things, your taxes, insurance, HOA dues, and floods insurance costs, those should all be input as annual numbers. So if somebody's, and I do this sometimes too, somebody's on the phone with you and they tell you, they want to do a loan on a condo, and you say, okay, what are the HOA fees for the condo? And you hear it in your ear, $300 a month, and your fingers just start typing 300, and you haven't multiplied that by 12 to get the annual number. you might be getting bad data. And particularly on a condo, it's more important because those HOA fees can really eat into the cash flow of a property. And I would hate to see that we, didn't put something in with the annual number, and then the debt service coverage ratio gets updated with the annual number, and suddenly, the property doesn't cash flow as well as we thought it did. Condos in particular can be difficult. I would also say your high valued single family properties can also be difficult for cash flow purposes, particularly when there's a really high tax amount for the property. We see that a lot in New Jersey, where property taxes are really expensive and single family properties have a harder time cash flowing. The multifamilies generally will cash flow pretty well. Release fees, we'll show you that in the sizer as well. For the portfolio loans, much easier to see how those work when we're using the actual sizer. And then Jacob's going to be covering for you guys the BLN calculator here. There's been some new functionality added to do portfolio loans within there, and some shortcuts so that you don't have to actually manually enter each of the individual data points. We can actually upload that from a spreadsheet. Makes it a lot easier, so we'll be going through those examples as well. And generically, we have some contact information here for you guys. If you're ever got any questions on some of these items, errors or miscalculations in the sizer, reach out to support and CC Jacob and Matt Voles at bridgeloannetwork.com. Generally, one of them or both of them will be able to jump on that pretty quickly for you. There's also a support staff there that works on the IT side of things. And if you have questions about the correspondent lending program or anything involved with that, your contact for that would be Tiffany Walker, our wholesale lending manager, twalker@rcncapital.com. And for any kind of IT tech support issues directly, you can send those to support@bridgeloannetwork.com. And if anybody has a training request, maybe you got some new employees who came on, reach out to the team here. They are absolutely available to set up a training with any new employees. We also encourage you guys to go onto the YouTube library. We have a number of these videos and trainings up and available for anybody who might be a new team member for you guys. And it's a great way to kind of get them off on the right foot and understanding both the BLN system, but also the products that we offer. And those guidelines that we sent out last month, again, that should be a big help for everybody too, just as far as learning where the boundaries are with each loan product. Okay, let me switch over here. So this is the internal portfolio loan tracker sheet that we talked about. And basically what you can do is you can put in the property information on this side, and basically you could copy and paste this right from the sizer itself. And then you can actually track, when your appraisals were ordered, when they were paid, when they were received, what the as-is value was, what the market rents were. Again, just making sure that each one has come in and that you're tracking these things. It can kind of keep you organized a little bit better. Same thing for the CDA. When did it get paid? When did it get ordered? Generally, they get ordered the same day or first thing the next morning. And when did we receive it? Tax certs, same thing. Generally, we're going to order these at the same time that we order the appraisal. Same goes for the flood certificate. And then as we slide over just a little bit here, we can go on the HOI side of things, right? Making sure we have the HOI received. Do we have the invoice or receipt for the policy? Do we know what the dwelling coverage amount is? Is that going to equal the same as the loan amount against that individual property? And does the rent loss requirement also meet the requirement of the sizer as well? We'll show you a couple examples. And if we have refis, we can also, verify ownership information through CoreLogic. That's a third-party website that we use. You guys wouldn't necessarily have to do that. But have we requested the payoff? Did we receive the payoff? Did we receive the verification of mortgage? And the same thing going for rental units, right? Did we receive the lease? Do we have verification that they've actually been collecting the rents? What did the appraiser say about the market rents? And then we can do that for each individual property as well as each individual unit within those properties. So handy dandy little tracking sheet here just to kind of keep you guys a little bit more organized. It works if you are diligent about maintaining it. If you're not paying attention to every little detail, this might be a little bit more confusing if you're not maintaining that data properly. And the other one that we have for you that you can send out to your clients individually when they want to submit an application to you for pricing is this data sheet. And this is, like I said, this is all the same information we have in the loan sizer, but it's much easier to fill out for the borrower. Just fill in the columns. Each row is its own property that has its own data, just like we have in the sizer. The borrower can put their personal information at the top as well. You guys can slap your own logo in here if you want. We can help you with that if need be, but great, simple, easy, fillable data sheet. They just got to give us the accurate information. And again, accuracy is the importance when we touch on these portfolio loans. Every little dollar of the expenses for taxes, insurance, flood, and HOA, the payoff amounts, the market rents and actual rents, everything in there has to be 100% accurate. If it's not, we could be getting the wrong terms, and that could lead to a bad service experience. So clearly want to make sure we have put in the proper data information in there. So here's an example of a loan portfolio sizer that we've done. This is actually a pretty recent one. This is a cash out scenario. So we've got that chosen as our designated loan type. We put the borrower's credit score in there, non-foreign national. They're going to go with the 5-year prepay. They like the lowest possible option. 30-year fixed rate. As you guys notice, we have ARM products available. Those are a little small on the screen right now, but 3-1, 5-1, 7-1, and 10-1 ARM. In the current rate environment, there is no advantage to taking an ARM product, so don't recommend one to enter clients. The pricing is actually higher if you choose an ARM than if you chose a regular one. So here at 0 points, we're at 5.8%. If I chose an ARM product, it actually goes to 5.93 and would only go up from there. So until we see a change in that, advise people that the fixed option is the best. You'll be notified if that does change over time. Historically speaking, it should, but we'll get there eventually. If they want to do an interest-only option, they have a 5 or 10-year choice on that. Most people will choose the non-interest-only option, though. And we have broker rebate options for you or your brokers that can earn additional income up to 0.75 points. This is paid outside of closing, so the borrower really doesn't know that they're paying for this. But in exchange for selling a higher interest rate, you guys can earn a little money off the HUD. This will be paid out just a few days after closing. And as you see here, if we put the broker rebate of 3/4 point, the rate goes up 0.5%. You're not required to do it. It's just an option if you're interested in doing it. And we do see a fair amount of the correspondent lenders taking advantage of that. And again, you don't have to do the full 0.75, even if it's just a 1/4 point. That might help you pay a processor or something like that on the loan. So what we want to go down into here is just to make sure we got the proper property information. What type of property is it? Single family, 2 to 4, condo, PUD, townhouse, what have you. We'll put the address. You put the city, state, and zip. I left them blank just to not reveal somebody's information as much, but I guess it really doesn't matter. There's no borrower name on it. But units, certainly important to know how many units there are. The sizer will be looking based on how many units you say there are, that we should be having rental information for that number of units. So make sure this matches up with how many leases we expect to have. And then we'll put in our annual property taxes, insurance, flood, and HOA dues for each individual property. Again, making sure that these are annualized numbers. We have the payoff amount for each mortgage on each property. We'll have the purchase price paid in this case for each property. These have all been bought 4+ years ago, so no issue there as far as seasoning goes. The borrower also rehabbed these properties since then. Not required, they provided it, which is nice, but the rehab requirement for what they've done to the property is only required when we have property that was purchased within the last 12 months. And then we'll have our as-is value, and then we're going to put in our rental information for each property. And again, if I'm looking at the sizer here, we're looking for an average value on each property of at least $100,000. So if I look in this lighter blue shaded section here, the top number in each of these sections is the total of the information that's put in here. The second number on the second level here, this is the average of the total information input below. So I can see here, I have a total amount of property valued at 1.545, but my average property value is 171,666.67. So this is a good way for you to kind of check and make sure, hey, am I meeting my average requirements here for per property value? Great, I can kind of cross that off my list and move on. No property is less than 75,000, so that's not going to be an issue here. If we're using this for just a fee quote up or loan quote up front, I would always put the actual rents and the market rents as the same number if we already have it rented out. If we don't know what it is, use your best estimate or the borrower's best estimate for what they think they can get for rents. Try not to overinflate that number. Try to be as accurate as you possibly can be. We don't know what the appraiser is going to come up with, but we want to be as close to that number as we can so we can set realistic expectations for pricing up front. If the unit is not occupied, just change this to a no instead of a yes, and make sure that we don't have any actual rents put in there. At that point, we would just be going off 95% of the market rents. So as we slide over, here's the part of the sizer I really want to show you guys. And the sizer is going to make suggested loan amounts based on the information we put in here. And as we look, based on these individual loan amounts for each property, we're also given an individual DSCR for each property. And I notice on the first one, I have a DSCR of less than 1. So the way we can accommodate for that, as we talked about in the slideshow, is that we got to get a DSCR minimum of at least 1.0. So I need to reduce this loan amount down. I think 137 will do it. And now I can see, based on my inputted loan amount, I have a DSCR of 1.001. That meets the requirement. I can still do this. The other thing you're going to see here is the release fees are actually going to be calculated for you. This is based on the initial loan amount for each loan. This will be the starting point, the 120% release fee that we talked about. This will come down over time, though, as the mortgage balance gets paid down. But suffice to say, a little bit more of a visual aid here to help you guys understand the information that's in the sizer itself. So based on my manual override here, I have a loan amount of 1.145750, and I should be coming here and adjusting my loan terms for that. And based on those loan terms, I'm still at 74.16% loan to value. So that still puts me at the 75% pricing bucket. Until I get to this number or less, I'm always going to be in the higher pricing category. If somebody wanted the lower category, we can just manually input that here. But this is still a loan amount above and beyond that. So I would still be at the 5.8% if the borrower wanted the 0 point option. But I would reduce my loan amount based on the fact that my DSCR here needs to be at least 1.0. A couple of things to note. Anytime we put a sizer together, these all get vetted out and reviewed by our treasury team on the front end. So before you tell your clients, hey, this is good to go, make sure these get vetted with our team first, and then we can confirm that that pricing actually is valid. It's just a little spot check. As we mentioned, we certainly don't want to be giving people the wrong impression or setting them up for failure if we've given them bad information or maybe had bad inputs in the sizer. So those are the type of things we're going to be checking out on our end just to make sure no issues going forward. It's a pain in the butt to do these loans sometimes. It's even worse when we have, bad data in and then we have to make corrections and adjustments because each little adjustment can have a ripple effect through the rest of the portfolio. But the flexibility of having the portfolio and using these higher cash flowing properties to compensate for the lower cash flowing property is a big advantage. If this loan here was done individually for this one property, we would have to get this DSCR to be 1.1. So you'd be lending even less on that particular loan. We'd probably have to go down even further. Yeah, closer to 119 maybe. So, they'd be losing, that's, I don't know, $19,000 in loan size there, just based on the fact that you would have to do that as an individual loan. So certainly less desirable if we were doing that as an individual loan. This is where that compensation of the portfolio will support it. With that, we're going to turn it over to Jacob, who's going to do some demonstrations for us on the loan calculator. If you guys have questions, though, please put them into the chat, and we will be addressing those as we come. Jacob, are you there?
I'm here. I'm just waiting for the access to share my screen, Chris. Give me 1 second.
That should come over just now.
Let me know when you see that go.
You're good to go.
All right, perfect. So first of all, thanks for all that information, Chris. I'm not going to speak too much about pricing or anything like that, as we've kind of already spent a good amount of time doing that. I'm going to focus strictly on the functionality when we're working on these portfolio loans, what it's going to look like in BLN, some of the shortcuts that you can take. I'll kind of start by emphasizing the importance of having the sizer for these portfolio loans. As Chris mentioned, it's going to be, reviewed by not only the underwriting team, but upfront by the treasury team as well. So for portfolio specifically, always a good idea to start with the sizer. Make sure you've got all those properties input. From there, I'm going to show you how we can actually use that sizer to create a loan. So right now, I'm just kind of in the general home screen, the loan request screen here. When we go to create a new loan request, for this example, I'm just going to go straight to the intake form by selecting this button that says create new request. and then I'll kind of scroll down towards the collateral section here. So when I get to this property info section, if you're working on a scenario where there's more than one piece of property involved, you're always going to have these two options. You can manually input the information for those properties. And it's going to start with always the first property here, which would be the subject if it were a single property loan. And then as you need to add on those other pieces of collateral, you simply hit this button that says add additional collateral, and that's going to allow you to add in those other properties. There's no limit there. So again, as many properties as you have on the file, you can go ahead and continue to hit that add additional property button. Now, the other way you could do it, if you already have the sizers completed, would be to hit this button that says import collaterals. Basically what that's going to do is it's going to allow you to come in and upload that sizer. It's going to take all the information of those properties from that sizer, import it here into the intake form. Really from there, you would just be responsible for the overall loan information, the guarantor information, and then obviously if there was an external broker, we would fill that section out as well. So those are your two shortcuts there when you're entering in a new loan that would be a portfolio loan. Again, first option is always to manually input those properties with their given detailed information, or if you've gotten the sizer completed, you can go in here and import those collaterals. Again, that's only going to be that portfolio loan sizer. That's the document that it's looking for here in the import collaterals. So we want to make sure that that's the document we're using to get those properties in there. Now, once we've created the loan, I've already in a loan request here on another tab. I've moved my way to the collateral tab. For whatever reason, if we needed to add in additional properties, let's say we created this loan originally and we forgot to add in the additional properties, you can always come to the collateral page here and add in those additional properties. You can see right now it's only listing one here. If we needed to add in more than one piece of collateral, you could do so by hitting this button where it will just ask you to fill out this collateral info here. Now, if you've already entered in the property, whether you've done it through uploading the sizer like I just showed you, or you manually inputted those properties, you're going to have the ability to see them all listed here where you'll be able to toggle through those different properties. And then if need be, you'll always have the ability to edit the information on those given properties here. So on this particular loan scenario, again, I only have one property, so it's showing me the information here for that one property. Let's say I were to switch, if I had another property on here and I were to switch to one of those other properties, it would allow me to see and edit that information for that piece of collateral itself. Now, kind of what we've all been waiting for is how is this going to look in the loan calculator? So right now, what I've done is I've just opened up the loan calculator. The first thing I'll show you is the new drop down here. The portfolio section is going to be listed under loan program. So right now you can see we've still got short-term 12-month, short-term 24-month. You've got your two 30-year options, single family and multifamily. You've got your ground-up construction. And then if we scroll down here, our last option is now portfolio 30-year. So if that's the product that we're looking to go with, obviously that's the selection we're going to want to make. That's going to reduce your use of funds here. Once you've selected your use of funds, it's going to ask you to fill out some additional information here. Now, this is if we were going through and adding this information manually. I could come in, I could add in the information here that we're always requiring, again, with those red asterisks being the indicator. And then down here where it says edit portfolio, this is where you would be able to add in additional properties. You just search given their address, it's going to allow you to click on that property and add it in. That's the manual way of doing this. If we already have that sizer completed, which I said again earlier, for these particular scenarios, it's probably best to start with that sizer. You can do the same thing and import that sizer here. When you do so, it's going to allow you to select the document that you want to use, i.e. the sizer that's been completed. It's going to take all that information from those properties, and it's going to input all that information here to the loan calculator. Now, I've already taken that step, and I saved that loan file here in my calculator, so I'm just going to go ahead and open that up so we don't have to wait for that upload to occur. So now that I opened up my saved pricing here, You can see it saved all the information from my sizer. It even added in my 9 properties. If I needed to edit any of those, they would be listed here. I can click the little pencil here to edit the given information on any of those specific properties. When I come back to the calculate pricing option, again, much like all the other 30-year options that we have in the calculator, the first thing we need to do is select the points and rate to RCN. So for this, you can get all the way down to 0 upfront points for RCN. And then again, you can go all the way down if your client is a little bit more rate sensitive. For our example here, I'm just going to go ahead and make the selection of 1 point to RCN. That's going to give the client a rate of 5.30. When I make that selection here, down below is where I have the opportunity to edit any of the other additional information. It's always going to show me the max amount requested and max loan amount, as always. If we need to adjust those at all, you can do so here. Here, it's going to show us the suggested loan terms. Now, for portfolio specifically, it's going to be really important to remember that this top section that says suggested loan terms, that's going to be the overall sum for this loan file. It's going to take into account all the properties, and that's what we're seeing here. If there is additional points for you, the correspondent, you can add those in here. Always going to default to adding those broker points. If there is no third-party broker, again, folks, as always, just drop that down to 0. Now, when you're ready to take your next step, whether you want to create a loan if you haven't already, you can do so from here, as always, by hitting this Create Loan button. It's going to carry over all the information that we have here into our intake form, where we just have to add in the guarantor's information. You can also save the pricing, which on this example I had already done. But again, you just need to give it a name if you haven't already. You can see here, I've made some changes on this. So it's asking me, do I want to update my saved already? Or do I want to save this as a new pricing? I can do either option there. Again, for this one specifically, guys, really going to be important to get your loan officer's feedback on these. You can do it by either sending them the sizer, or you can always send the pricing here through the calculator. If you needed to, again, let's say, for example, you started with the calculator as opposed to importing the sizer. You just came here and you manually input all of these properties. You can actually still get the sizer from the loan calculator here. And then ultimately, the most important thing would be downloading that pricing, which is going to be that term sheet for you here. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. I hit download pricing, downloads that for me as a PDF. When I open up the PDF, we're just going to take a quick look here, folks. As I mentioned, the top section is going to show you the overall information for all properties. So you can see all of these are gross sum values. It's not per property, it's for all of them. As we come down here, we're going to see our suggested loan terms, the way that you structured that in the loan calculator, your closing costs and liquidity, and then here we're going to have all of those different properties broken out with their unique information for that specific property. So you see property 1, we've got the unique information for that property, and then as I mentioned above at the top here, the loan info is going to show us the gross sum for all that information listed. Chris, that wraps it up for me and everything that I was looking to cover here today. Are there any questions or things that you want to be covering here before we wrap up the call?
Yeah, I believe Erica mentioned we do have a question about the cost of, sorry, there's an echo there, about the cost of appraisals. In the current market,
I can read the question for you too, Chris. It said, are appraisal costs on portfolio loans the same as a single property? Is it less expensive, and can BPOs be used?
Sure. So it has the potential to be less expensive on a portfolio, assuming that all the properties are actually in the same general area. So as long as the same appraiser can service all the markets that the properties are in, yes, you can get bulk pricing on those, and you do get some discounts on those over time. Individually, appraisals might be a little bit higher than that, but generally, if we have a bulk order, we do see some discounts on there. In the current market, appraisers are still very busy, so it's maybe not as good a pricing as there might have been, a year ago or whatever, but certainly a discount from the standard individual pricing. BPOs are generally not acceptable unless we have an issue getting a full appraisal, but we're looking to be more flexible on that in the going forward, as we've all encountered the pains of this current appraisal environment. That would be approved on an exception basis, though, and just kind of as a my own personal experience using BPOs, I don't like the values on them. The values can be wildly off from what an appraiser is going to be. I actually had one a week ago from a guy, and he thought he got a bad appraisal. Well, he saw the BPO and it was even worse. And it's just they can be very inconsistent, and I would hate to think that a borrower's staking their long-term loan maybe on a bogus or not as good of evaluation on a BPO. So that can be a little bit of a pain point for some folks. The full appraisal is still the best possible option to get the highest likelihood of success on a given value, particularly on something that might be right around that 100K mark or something. I want to make sure I'm getting the benefit of the doubt from an appraiser as best I can. The BPOs we see just a lot of the ones I see are 10, 20 or more % lower than what we expect them to be. And then every once in a while, I'll get one that's like $100,000 more than the property's even being sold for, and I'll just scratch my head. It's that kind of variability to those reports that makes them a real wild card, though. And it's harder for us as a lender to really, feel good about those. But when we're in a situation where, full appraisals really aren't giving us a particular option, our first piece of, remedy for that is probably to see if we can find a non-AMC option to get a full appraisal done. And even if that's, coming back to us with crazy turn times, it's at that point we'll probably be looking for BPOs to substitute. But ideally we're not using BPOs for the most part. I know they can be cheap and fast, but the accuracy of them is, sometimes creates its own problems. Any other questions, Erica?
Not at this time.
Okay. A little bit of a smaller group than we usually have for today. I know it's kind of a busy time of the month here, and we've got some trade shows coming up. RCN will be in attendance tomorrow and the next day at the New England Mortgage Expo at Mohegan Sun. So if any of you guys happen to be attending, please be sure to stop by the booth and say hi to the folks there. Jeff Desch, our CEO, will be there as well, and RCN should be hosting a party as well. So hopefully you guys can make it to it if you're attending. But I want to thank everybody for their time. As always, the materials from the presentation today will be made available to you guys, and the recording for this will be put on our YouTube so that you guys have future use of this information if you get any new employees who come on or anything like that. But we really appreciate you guys coming on and trying to learn a little bit more about the products and the system. And if you guys have anything that we can help you with, long term, or if there's a topic you'd like us to cover or spend some more time on, let us know. We love that feedback, and we're doing this for your benefit. So whatever you guys think is the most beneficial for you, we want to be able to address those and give you a full presentation each month to really enhance your experience as a correspondent lender and really grow your business. If we can do those things together, all parties will be happy, and we'll all be having a good time at the next trade show we see each other. On behalf of Jacob, Erica, and Tiffany, I want to thank you guys again all for joining us, and we'll catch you next month. Enjoy the rest of your day.